Amanda Reeves pushed her cleaning cart through the hallways of the Portland, Oregon Fire Department with the same precise movements she had performed for the past 3 years. Her gray hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her navy blue cleaning uniform hung loosely on her slender frame. No one gave her a second glance as she passed, scrubbing the floor in methodical circular motions. This was exactly how she wanted it. Invisibility had become her refuge, her protection against a world that had broken her in ways no one there could have imagined. It was 6 a.m. when she started her shift, always before most of the firefighters arrived for the morning briefing. She liked the silence of those early hours, when only the distant hum of the kitchen refrigerator and the occasional creak of her own boots against the linoleum broke the quiet. There was something comforting about the simplicity of that work. Clean, organize, repeat. No life or death decisions. No responsibilities weighing like anchors on her shoulders. No lives depending on her choices. She remembered when everything was different. 22 years ago, Amanda had walked into that same building as a 23-year-old rookie, the first woman to be accepted into the Portland Brigade in a decade. The men looked at her with barely disguised skepticism, making bets on how long she would last. 3 months, some said. 6 months at most, others agreed. None of them imagined she would become a legend. For 18 years, Amanda Reeves was Captain Reeves, one of the most respected commanders in the entire state. She had led rescues in burning 15-story buildings, coordinated operations during the Great Forest Fire that devastated the nearby mountains in 2010, and trained 3 generations of new firefighters. Her arms bore scars from second-degree burns, each a story of heroism. Her team would follow her to hell, literally, because they knew she would bring them back. But then came that day in March of 2020, a fire in an apartment complex in the city center. She was coordinating the operation outside when she heard the screams. A child was trapped on the 4th floor. Her team couldn't reach her in time. Amanda didn't think twice. She ran inside, climbed the stairs that were already beginning to collapse, and found the girl hiding under a bed. She managed to get her out and hand her over to the paramedics. The child survived without a scratch. But when Amanda went back to check if anyone else was there, a beam in the ceiling gave way. The impact threw her 3 meters down, crashing through a floor already weakened by the flames. She woke up 2 weeks later in the hospital with 3 compressed vertebrae, a shattered left shoulder, and a concussion that left her short-term memory fragmented for months. Doctors said she was lucky to be alive. It didn't seem like luck. Physical recovery took a year. Mental recovery never truly happened. Amanda developed severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The sound of sirens made her freeze, paralyzed by flashbacks. The smell of smoke triggered panic attacks so intense that she would faint. She couldn't sleep more than 2 hours at a time without waking up drenched in sweat, reliving that endless fall through the flames. The department offered therapy, support, an administrative position, but Amanda could no longer enter that building as Captain Reeves, the woman she had been, the fearless commander who never hesitated, had died in that fire along with her old life. In her place was this broken, haunted version of herself, who barely recognized herself in the mirror. Then she disappeared. She moved to a small apartment on the other side of town, cut off contact with all her colleagues, let her hair grow long and turn gray naturally. When she finally felt she needed to go back to work, to have some structure, some purpose, she applied for a janitorial position at the fire department in a neighboring district. Not District 5, where she had served, but District 3, on the other side of Portland. She used her maiden name on the documents, something she hadn't done in decades. Nobody recognized her. Why would they? She was just another middle-aged woman with gray hair pushing a cleaning cart. For 3 years, Amanda existed in this new ghostly reality. She cleaned the same corridors she once walked with authority. She organized the equipment she once commanded. She listened to the young firefighters' conversations about their operations, their fears, their victories, and remained silent. Sometimes when she was alone in the locker room, she would stop in front of the lockers, run her fingers over the insignia and helmets, and allow herself to remember, but only for a moment. Then she would return to her cart, her bucket, her invisibility. The firefighters from District 3 were kind to her, in the absent-minded way people are kind to those they consider part of the scene. "Good morning, Mrs. Reeves," some would say. Most just nodded. She was the woman who made sure their beds were made. The kitchen floor was clean. The bathrooms had toilet paper. Essential, but invisible. Captain Marcus Webb was the commander of District 3, a man in his 40s with an impeccable reputation. He always greeted her properly, asked how her day was going, and thanked her for her work. Amanda appreciated this, but kept the interactions brief. The less people knew about her, the better. It was on an ordinary Tuesday in October that everything changed. Amanda was cleaning the equipment room when she heard the commotion. Raised voices, hurried movements, the unmistakable sound of boots running. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to become even more invisible, but the door burst open and 3 firefighters rushed in, pulling their equipment. A major industrial fire, warehouse district, they said. They called in all available units. Captain Webb was organizing the response, but there was confusion. 2 trucks had already been dispatched to a car accident on the bridge. The team was split. Resources were limited. Amanda overheard fragments of the conversation as they prepared. Chemicals involved. Risk of explosion. Workers trapped. She felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the beginning of a panic attack. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, counted to 10. But then she heard Captain Webb on the radio. His, voice tense. "We need more coordination here. Someone who knows hazardous materials protocols. The officer on duty is in training in Seattle." Amanda found herself walking to the command room before she could think things through. Captain Webb was surrounded by maps and tablets, his face etched with worry. He saw her and blinked, surprised. "Mrs. Reeves, this isn't the best time." She should have gone back to her cart. She should have remained invisible. But something in her, something of the woman she had been, couldn't stay quiet while lives were at risk. "I can help," she said, her voice firmer than it had been in years, "with the hazardous materials protocols." Webb looked at her, confused. "With all due respect, madam, this requires specialized training." "I have that training," Amanda replied. The words came out more easily now, as if a floodgate had been opened. "Level 3 certification in hazardous materials response. I've commanded operations involving chemical fires for 15 years. I can walk you through the protocols." Webb hesitated, looking at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. There was something in his eyes, an incipient recognition. "Who are you?" he asked softly. Before Amanda could respond, the radio crackled. "Captain Webb, the situation is escalating. Secondary explosion. We need guidance now." There was no time for explanations. Amanda approached the table, looked at the maps. "Is this a metal processing warehouse?" she asked. Webb nodded, still stunned. "Then you're probably dealing with magnesium or aluminum powder. Never use water directly on flames. Class D only. Dry sand, special powder. Water will create hydrogen and make everything worse." Webb stared at her for a long moment, then picked up the radio. "All units, special code. No water on the primary flames. I repeat, no water. Class D only." He looked at Amanda. "What else?" She leaned over the map, her mind working with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. "Ventilation is critical. You need to establish hot, warm, and cold zones. Evacuation within a radius of at least 200 meters. If there are trapped workers, the rescue team needs self-contained breathing apparatus with extended supply. Heavy metal fumes are lethal." As she spoke, Amanda noticed that other firefighters had gathered at the entrance to the room, observing the surreal scene of the cleaning lady giving tactical instructions to the captain. But she couldn't stop now. Her mind was completely focused on the problem, the risks, the solutions. It was as if the last 3 years of silence had never happened. For 40 minutes, Amanda coordinated the response alongside Webb, offering precise guidance on every aspect of the operation. When the fire was finally contained and all the workers safely rescued, the relief in the room was palpable. Webb turned to her, his hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. "You saved lives today. We need to talk. Who are you, really?" Amanda felt the weight of the question. Part of her wanted to run, to return to her invisibility, to the safety of not being seen. But another part, the part that had just reawakened, knew there was no turning back. "I am," she began, her voice faltering. "I was Captain Amanda Reeves, District 5. I retired 3 years ago on disability." The silence in the room was absolute. Then one of the older firefighters stepped forward. "Good heavens, Captain Reeves. The legend of the Great Forest Fire? You're alive?" Webb kept looking at her, but now there was understanding in his eyes. "The apartment complex fire. You were the one who saved the child and almost died. I read the report when I was studying command cases in crisis situations. You're an icon in the training of new captains." Amanda felt tears burning her eyes. "I was many things. Now I'm just a janitor trying to survive each day." Webb shook his head slowly. "With all due respect, Captain, what you just did wasn't janitorial work. It was elite commando work. And you saved 6 lives that would have been lost if we had used standard fire protocols." In the following days, the news spread. The District 3 caretaker was in fact the legendary Captain Reeves. Firefighters from all over the city began to show up, wanting to meet her, thank her for her service, hear her stories. Amanda felt exposed, vulnerable, but also strangely relieved. Carrying the weight of anonymity had been her own form of imprisonment. Captain Webb contacted her a week later. He had a proposal. "We don't expect you to return to operational work, not after what you've been through, but would you consider working as a training consultant, teaching advanced protocols, sharing your experience? It would be at your own pace, without pressure." Amanda hesitated. The idea of returning to that world terrified her, but it also intrigued her. Perhaps there was a middle ground between being the fearless Captain Reeves and being the invisible Mrs. Reeves. Perhaps she could find a new version of herself, one that honored who she had been without demanding that she become that person again. She started slowly, occasional lectures on safety and protocols, then training sessions on hazardous materials response. The young firefighters listened to her with a reverence that made her uncomfortable, but there was also something healing about it. Each story she shared, each lesson she taught, seemed to loosen the bonds of trauma that had imprisoned her for so long. 3 months after the industrial fire, District 5 held a ceremony. They wanted to formally honor her, recognize her service, and officially introduce her as a consultant to the entire Portland department. Amanda almost refused. Returning to District 5, seeing her old colleagues, facing that building again, seemed impossible. But on the morning of the ceremony, she looked in the mirror and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Not the invincible Captain Reeves of before, not the broken and hidden Mrs. Reeves, but something in between. A woman who had survived the impossible, who had been completely lost and was finding her way back, hesitant step by hesitant step. When she entered the main hall of District 5, the place was packed. Firefighters from all over the city, some she had trained, others who only knew of her legend. She saw faces she hadn't seen in years, people who had been her family before everything fell apart. Some had tears in their eyes. Fire Chief Daniel Morrison took to the podium. Amanda remembered him as a young lieutenant when she was a captain. Now he commanded the entire department. "Today," he began, his voice echoing through the hall, "we pay tribute to one of the finest leaders this department has ever had. Captain Amanda Reeves served with distinction for 18 years. She saved countless lives, trained generations of firefighters, and set standards of excellence that continue to guide us today." He paused, looking directly at Amanda. "But this ceremony isn't just about your past. It's about recognizing that heroism isn't the absence of fear or pain. Heroism is continuing to serve in any way possible, even when the world has broken you. Captain Reeves continued to serve, even when we thought we had lost her, even when she herself thought she had lost herself." Morrison stepped down from the podium and walked over to Amanda. He was carrying something in his hands, a gleaming badge. "This is a new position we've created specifically for you, Captain Consultant. It's not frontline work. It's mentoring, teaching, and being a guardian of wisdom. It's ensuring that everything you've learned, all your experience, is never lost. Do you accept?" Amanda looked at the badge, then at all the faces in the hall. She thought about her journey, from the determined young rookie trying to prove her worth, to the confident commander at the peak of her career, to the broken woman hiding behind a cleaning cart, to this moment. She was still afraid. There were still days when the sound of sirens made her tremble, but there were also days like that industrial fire, when all her experience and knowledge could make the difference between life and death. "I accept," she said, her voice firm. And as Morrison pinned the badge to her jacket, the hall erupted in applause. But what Amanda noticed most were the faces of the young firefighters in the front row, looking at her with hope and admiration. She had something to offer them. Not invincibility, or the promise that they would never break, but something more valuable. The promise that even when you break, even when you completely lose yourself, there is a way back. It may not take you to where you were before, but it may take you somewhere new, somewhere with its own kind of strength. In the following months, Amanda found her rhythm in this new role. She still had bad days, moments when the trauma returned with full force, but there were also good moments, when she saw a young firefighter master a technique she had taught, or when she received a thank you email from someone whose life had been touched by her lectures. Slowly, she was rebuilding not her old life, but a new one, made of fragments of what she had been and who she was becoming. And when she walked the halls of District 5 now, she was no longer invisible. People greeted her, not as the janitor, but as captain. And though it still frightened her at times, this recognition was something she was learning to carry again. Not with the unwavering certainty of her youth, but with the hard-won wisdom of someone who had survived the worst and chosen to continue serving nonetheless. Amanda was in her small office in District 5, reviewing training materials for the coming week, when she heard a hesitant knock on the door. "Come in," she said, without lifting her eyes from the documents scattered across her desk. When she finally looked, she saw a young firefighter standing in the doorway, her uniform still too immaculate to have seen real action. The girl couldn't have been more than 22, with brown hair pulled back in a tight ponytail and eyes that held a mixture of determination and uncertainty. "Captain Reeves," the young woman began, her voice trembling slightly. "My name is Sarah Chen. I wanted to speak with you about something, if you have a moment." Amanda gestured to the chair opposite her desk, studying the young woman as she sat down with her back, rigidly straight. There was something familiar about that defensive posture, that attempt to appear more confident than she actually felt. Sarah took a deep breath before continuing. "I graduated from the academy 3 months ago. I've always wanted to be a firefighter ever since I was 10 years old, and saw firefighters save my brother from a burning car. I studied harder than anyone in my class, pushed myself to the limit in every physical exercise, and aced every test." She paused, her fingers nervously interlaced in her lap. "But now that I'm really here, everything feels different. The men on my team aren't overtly hostile, but they make jokes about me not being able to lift heavy equipment, question my decisions during drills, and treat me like I'm made of glass. And the worst part is, I'm starting to believe them." Amanda leaned back in her chair, vividly recalling similar conversations she'd had throughout her career, both as the insecure young woman and as the mentor. She could see the pain and frustration in Sarah's eyes, the fear of not being good enough, of having made a mistake in choosing this career. "What do you want me to tell you?" Amanda asked gently. "That it will get easier? That one day they will automatically respect you?" Sarah seemed surprised by the question. "I don't know. I guess I was expecting you to tell me I'm doing something wrong, that I need to work harder or prove my worth somehow." Amanda shook her head slowly. "You're not doing anything wrong. And as for working harder, I can assure you that you already are. The problem isn't you, Sarah. The problem is that some people still think women don't belong in this job, and nothing you do will change their minds." The young woman seemed disheartened by these words, but Amanda continued. "But here's the truth I've learned in 22 years in this profession. You don't need their approval to do your job. You need competence, courage, and commitment. The rest is just noise. There will be people who will never respect you, no matter how many lives you save, and that will hurt. I won't lie. But there will also be people, more than you imagine, who will see your value and support you." Sarah discreetly wiped away a tear that had escaped. "I heard about what happened to you. The fire, the injury, how you disappeared for years." She hesitated, as if unsure whether she should continue. "I don't mean to offend you, but this scares me. If someone as incredible as you can break down like this, what awaits me?" It was a fair question, and Amanda took a moment to consider it carefully. "I broke down, Sarah, completely, and I spent 3 years believing that the woman I had been was dead, that I could never be useful in this world again." She looked out the window, watching the firefighters in the yard conducting training exercises. "But the truth is, I didn't die in that fire. I changed, and change isn't the same as death, although sometimes it feels like it." Amanda turned, back to Sarah, her eyes meeting the young woman's with an intensity that made her straighten up even more in her chair. "You're going to break at some point. We all break. It might not be a physical injury like mine. It might be a rescue gone wrong, a life you couldn't save, a mistake you'll carry with you. This job breaks us in different ways. The question isn't if it will happen, but what you'll do afterward." Sarah absorbed those words in silence for a long moment, How did you know what to do next? She finally asked. Amanda gave a short, humorless laugh. I didn't know. I spent 3 years in hiding, doing everything I could to avoid being seen, to avoid remembering who I had been. It wasn't a courageous or noble decision. It was pure fear. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. What brought me back wasn't strength or courage. It was necessity. There was a moment when people needed what I knew, and I couldn't stay quiet. It was instinct, not heroism. The young firefighter nodded slowly, processing. So there's no manual for this. There's no right way to deal with it. Exactly, Amanda confirmed. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying. Each person finds their own way through trauma, through fear, through doubt. My job isn't to give you answers, Sarah. It's to tell you that when you feel lost, and you will, it doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human. Sarah was silent for a moment, then asked in a low voice, Are you still afraid? Every day, Amanda admitted without hesitation. The sound of sirens still makes me freeze sometimes. There are nights when I can't sleep because I'm reliving memories I'd rather forget. But I've learned that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's deciding that there's something more important than your fear. For me, it's ensuring that young firefighters like you have the tools and knowledge to stay safe out there. The conversation continued for another 40 minutes, with Sarah asking questions about specific techniques, about how to deal with difficult colleagues, about how to build self-confidence when everything around you seemed to be testing you. Amanda answered each question honestly, sharing not only her successes, but also her failures, her doubts, her moments of weakness. She realized that this was what the young firefighters needed to hear, not stories of invincible heroism, but the raw truth about what it meant to do this job. When Sarah finally stood up to leave, she looked different, not necessarily more confident, but more grounded, as if she had found something solid to lean on. Thank you, Captain. This helped more than you can imagine. Amanda smiled, a genuine smile that still felt strange on her face after so many years. My door is always open, Sarah. And remember, you're not alone in this. There are more women in this department now than when I started. Build alliances, support each other. That's how we change things. In the following weeks, Amanda noticed that Sarah wasn't the only one seeking her out. Other firefighters, both men and women, began showing up in her office with their own questions, their own insecurities, their own unresolved traumas. She realized there was an unmet need in the department, a space for vulnerability and honesty that didn't exist amidst the culture of strength and stoicism that dominated firefighting. Captain Webb approached her with a proposal. Have you thought about formalizing this? Creating a structured mentorship program? There are funds available, and frankly, what you're doing is having a real impact on morale and staff retention. Amanda considered the idea. She had never planned to become a mentor or counselor. Her goal had simply been to survive each day, to find some purpose amidst the wreckage of her previous life. But perhaps this was her new purpose, built not despite her trauma, but because of it. She began developing a mentoring program that combined technical training with emotional support. Monthly sessions where firefighters could speak openly about their fears, their doubts, their traumatic experiences. She brought in therapists specializing in PTSD to work with the department, breaking the stigma surrounding seeking mental health help. Slowly, the culture began to change, not drastically, not overnight, but there was a noticeable shift in how firefighters spoke to each other, in their willingness to admit vulnerability. One spring afternoon, 6 months after, the ceremony that had officially brought her back, Amanda was giving a lecture to a group of rookies on safety protocols when her phone vibrated. It was a message from Sarah Chen. Captain, I need you. Emergency situation. Abandoned warehouse, East District. Child trapped. Team is hesitant to enter. Amanda felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the beginning of panic. But this time, she recognized the feeling, breathed through it, and acted. She arrived at the scene 15 minutes later, finding Sarah and her team outside a ruined 3-story building. The fire wasn't large yet, but the structure was visibly unstable, with cracked walls and corroded supports. A hysterical mother screamed that her 7-year-old son had gone inside playing and couldn't get out. Sarah approached Amanda, her face pale. The lieutenant didn't want to risk a team. He said the structure could collapse at any moment. He called in specialized units, but they would take at least 20 minutes. Amanda looked at the building, her hands trembling slightly. She hadn't been inside a burning building since her accident. The mere thought made her heart race, cold sweat trickling down her spine. But then she heard the muffled cries of the child coming from inside, and something within her stabilized. She was no longer the invincible Captain Reeves who knew no fear, but she was also no longer the broken woman hiding behind a cleaning cart. She was something in between, someone who knew fear, intimately, but had learned to act despite it. "I'm not going in," she told Sarah, seeing the disappointment in the young woman's eyes, "but I'll coordinate the operation." Amanda turned to the lieutenant, a 40-year-old man she didn't know personally. "With all due respect, Lieutenant, 20 minutes is a long time. But there's a way to do this safely. We need a quick reconnaissance of the structure, identify the safest support points, and send in a light team with a safety line. Entry and exit in less than 5 minutes." The lieutenant looked at her skeptically. "And who exactly are you to give orders?" Sarah stepped forward, her voice firm. "She's Captain Amanda Reeves, sir. And if there's anyone here who knows how to do this safely, it's her." The lieutenant blinked, clearly recognizing the name. He glanced between Amanda and the building, then nodded abruptly. "What needs to be done?" For the next 8 minutes, Amanda coordinated the operation with the precision of her former days, but with a newfound awareness of the risks. She wasn't commanding from invincibility, but from experience tempered by pain. When the team finally emerged with the child safe and sound, Amanda felt a wave of relief so intense that her knees almost buckled. Sarah held her arm, smiling broadly. "You did it, Captain. We saved him." Amanda shook her head, looking at the young firefighter. "We did it, Sarah. You called me. You trusted your intuition that there was a safe way to do the rescue. That's leadership. And leadership doesn't mean never being afraid. It means acting wisely despite fear." As she drove home that night, Amanda reflected on how her life had changed in the past year. She wasn't completely healed yet. She still carried visible and invisible scars. But she had found a new purpose, a new way to serve that honored both who she had been and who she was becoming. She thought of Sarah and the other young firefighters who were just beginning their journeys, facing their own challenges, their own doubts. Amanda finally understood that her story wasn't about returning to who she had been. It was about building something new from the fragments, about finding strength not despite her wounds, but through the process of healing them. She was the caretaker who became captain again, not because she had forgotten her pain, but because she had learned to carry it while still serving others. And in that service, in that daily choice of showing up even when it was difficult, she had found not her old life, but something perhaps even more valuable, a new understanding of what it meant to be truly strong.